Hello and happy gaming, everybody. My name is Dark Sage Walker, and I think it's time for some Miseri. Yeah, we can look outside and already see the Miseri. Thanks, buddy. You didn't have to remind me. No. We're talking about the Miseri spells from One Step from Eden. I know the real world sucks right now, and that's why I'm playing video games. Do. But no, seriously, I'm aware that there's plenty of garbage going on in the world right now, so we could all use a little entertainment and escapism, and to that end, that's part of why I present you this list. It's also I just kind of enjoy doing it. So the usual rules apply. As much as I can, apply every spell in as much of a vacuum as I can. Special instances will be covered. Yada yada yada. Let's do this. Now, before we really get started, I do feel I should explain, because there are very few spells outside of Miseri that deal with poison. Let me real quick explain how poison works in this game. So, when you take an amount of poison, we'll just off the bat say 40 poison damage. When the timer ticks down for your poison, you take that 40 damage and then the amount gets cut in half, so it goes from 40 to 20, and then it repeats. So then you'll take 20 damage, and then it ticks down to 10. Now, I think once it ticks down that far, it goes away. But poison is a very potent and effective damage over time method, and there are some people that say that maybe poison is a little too strong in this game. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that, but it is strong. Make no mistake. A good poison build can really rip through even some of the strongest enemies. So, I want to bring that up because there are a lot of spells in the Miseri branch that deal with poison. And I wanted to make sure we all knew what was up with that. We were all on the same page as to how poison works. The Miseri brand deals mostly with poison, pain, things like that. But then the occasional heal, because, that necromancer that you hate dealing with so much, he may deal with the dark forces of death and how to reanimate corpses to do his bidding, but every now and again he casts a healing spell, so he can't be a bad guy, right? So, now that we've established how poison works, that should give you an idea of about how effective poison can be, and that'll give us a good baseline to rate some of these spells. So, now that we've got that out of the way, let's get going. We will start with Acid Rain. Rain arrows in a 3x3 area that apply 20 poison until you move, so it's another channel spell. If a shot hits an enemy, it does 20 damage in and of itself and applies 20 poison. And this just keeps going until you move. It only costs 1 mana, by the way. And yeah, do I really need to say anything else? This spell is just stupid. I don't mean stupid as in, oh, why would they put that in the game? I mean stupid as in, you can't get away from me. The acid rain will tear apart your soul. This spell can really rack up poison. It does require a little bit of luck, but it's not too hard to trap an enemy in a 3x3 area. And it's really effective against the wall. You don't have to sit there forever. You just set an enemy up in an area. It only needs to really hit a few times for it to do what it has to do, and then you dodge out of the way, and your enemy is hopefully worse for the wear than you are. Acid Rain usually finds a way into one of my decks should I spot it. It's just a good spell. It's one of those things where you have to understand you don't need to just sit there and channel it forever to build up some sort of weird, some sort of crazy, huge, massive damage pool. You just need to let it go for a little bit, hit a few times, wear down their health a little bit, set up that poison, and then you're good to go and do other things. So just don't overdo it and you'll be fine. Anubis. Apply 40 poison to all enemies. It costs 1 mana, it's a freaking common spell. I don't know about you guys, but I've never seen an enemy dodge Anubis. Now, and that is one of the problems I have with a lot of the automatic hit spells, so it must be like Sunshine. You set it off, they just get hit by it. So, there's no dodging, no saving throw, do not pass go, do not collect $200, just BAM! 40 poison. Now, one thing, so Okay, please don't do that. So, I'm not going to say that I think Anubis is one of the be-all, end-all spells in the game. 40 poison, unless you have resistant strain, is more or less just 70 damage. But it is 70 unblockable damage that the enemy is just forced to take. Sorry, I had to get a little lemon lime goodness. So ultimately, yeah, I think Anubis either belongs in A or S grade, just pretty easily. It's effective. What can I say? Backstab. Fire shots in all rows toward you that apply 100 poison. This costs 2 mana. It does 40 damage on hit, but the problem is you can also hit yourself with it. Now, that was one thing if you're playing Riva and if you happen to miss your target, no problem, just reflect it. But if you're playing as anyone other than Riva, this is a really tricky one to use because you have to try to dodge into the area where your opponent is going to get hit. And if they're throwing an attack out at the same time, this one to me is a bit more trouble than it's worth. I'm putting it down here with the proviso that if you're good at paying attention to where it goes, it definitely rates a little bit higher, especially against the Gate of Eden. This is just, 160 damage and 400 poison basically for free. It's good stuff in certain situations, but you also have the capacity to hit and poison yourself. That's not so good. Blood Shield. Gain 2 poison and 10 shield every second until you move, so another channel spell. It only costs 1 mana. Ultimately, I think this is a great spell to get yourself set up, so long as you're okay with managing your poison. Now, you don't want to sit here and just let it go and go and go until you have like 400 shield. Obviously, you probably aren't even going to be able to sit there and channel it that long in a dire situation. Hold on. Whew, thank you, Tummy. And let's look at this. If you did do that and you built yourself up to 400 shield using this, and that's also that's what, 80 poison? That's a lot of damage you got coming to you. But for the most part, it is more helpful than it is harmful. I think it's definitely worth a look. If you already have a bunch of Phalanx branded spells and you're not hurting for shield, then maybe skip it, but for the most part, a little extra protection isn't going to hurt. So, and the only reason why I'm not putting it at S grade is because it is one of those risk-reward things where you have to determine, can I handle the poison? Do I need the shielding badly enough to, inject this directly into my veins? Give it to me, baby, I need that shield. You really got to weigh risk-reward versus that one, but generally it's worth it. Booster Shot. Shot heals target for 100 HP. When this hits, fire a shot that applies 80 poison. So, one thing you can do with this, it's a little tricky, but you can fire a shot at, say, a rock to heal it for, the 100 HP that it doesn't care whether or not it loses, and then quickly move to make sure that the poison shot gets applied to something else. Now, my thoughts on this spell are... First of all, you have to be willing to heal your target for 100 HP. Now, granted, the poison will, in the long run, do well more than that. It's going to do 80, then 40, then 20, then 10, so... It's 150 damage in total, but first you have to hit them with the first shot, and then secondly, that entails that they're not going to move out of the way of the second shot when the first shot hits. And it also implies that you don't have to move out of the way of one of their attacks, thus forcing the second shot to miss because you had to do something silly like, I don't know, preserve your own meager existence. There's just too many steps to make Booster Shot work in my opinion. Some people will probably come to its defense and be like, no, Dark Sage, you're stupid. And, you know, that's what the discussion is open for. If I'm absolutely wrong about this, I'd love to have that discussion, as long as it's being kept civil. But just for how many steps you have to go through to get 80 poison, to me, doesn't seem worth it. There's much better ways to get 80 poison. Corset. Hit self for 40 damage and gain 100 shield. Now, I was originally on the side of Corset. That's stupid. Why would you do damage to yourself for that? And then I realized that 40 damage can come off of previously earned shielding. So say you're playing as Violet, all you have to do is go right trigger, step to the left, get your shield, use Corset. You've now got 100 shield instead of 40 shield. Or if you're playing as Riva, you can just straight up reflect the original damage from it and just get 100 shield literally for nothing aside from the cost of the reflect. So I like Corset, but I understand that it is one of those very heavy risk-reward things. So I'm putting it at A rank with the proviso that sometimes the risk is not worth it. Like, especially if you're on something like Hell Pass 14 and you only have 1 hit point to begin with. That'll be fun for me to go through, by the way. There'll probably be a few episodes of that on the channel. But sometimes it's just not worth it. And I completely understand and respect that. It's 7-Up, by the way. Unfortunately, there's no Sierra Mist going out from what I've heard. That is on... has temporarily ceased production, so that makes me a sad panda. Psynet. Apply Link to all enemies for 3 seconds. So let's explain what Link does. If there's an enemy on the field that has Link, then it takes damage whenever anything else takes damage. So let's say that there's an enemy that has Link, and then you're about to hit a completely different enemy, let's just say with Thunder for 100 damage. The enemy that has Link will also take 100 damage. So obviously this works really well in multi-enemy fights, but make no mistake, being able to set up Link on an enemy is real nice, especially when you don't have to worry about them dodging it, because Psynet will hit everything. It is a global effect. Well, I guess not global, but what I mean by that is it's an effect that the enemy can't do anything about. They're just gonna have that for 3 seconds, so my only real problem is that, yeah, it is nice that every enemy gets Link, but they only get it for 3 seconds, and since it costs 3 mana to cast, you kind of have to act not only quickly out of it, but with something relatively cheap, so... I don't know, I like the idea of Psynet. I want to put it at A, but I'm aware that because it costs 3 mana to cast, you really need something not only effective, but also cheap to come after Psynet, and you have to have good mana regen, and I don't know, it's very difficult to make Psynet work properly, but again, the idea of it is something, especially if you're pretty sure that your opponent is going to hit you with something big. You drop Psynet before that, and now your enemy and every other lackey that they have is also going to take a bunch of damage. So that's one use case for it, but I don't know, I'm a little iffy on Psynet, but again, I love the idea of that spell. I really do. I just also realized that it's one of those spells that really... it probably should be cheaper, or the Link should apply for longer than 3 seconds. Just my silly little opinion. Detox. Damage everyone for double their poison and remove their poison. So this costs absolutely nothing. Now, you can't get double cast with this, but the idea of what it does and the idea that it's also pretty automatic makes this spell a really interesting capstone to poison builds. I'm, again, a little on the fence about it, but again, the idea that the enemy can't dodge it, it costs nothing to use. And again, let's say you've got a good amount of poison on them, like they've sat in the acid rain, you know. They just sat there for a little while, you stayed dry, they felt the pain. Now they've got a bunch of poison on them, you can now hit them for a bunch of damage that they can't dodge, and there's nothing they can do about it. The problem, of course, is that it removes their poison, so you're starting over from scratch, but they took a good amount of damage in the process. I guess what really keeps this from going up to S grade is that it does remove their poison, but it costs 0, they can't dodge it, I don't know, it's a really good way to cap off a good poison combo, if you ask me. Oh, 7-Up, you make me a happy boy. Devour. If this shot kills the target, heal 100 HP, consume. So this costs 3 mana, and it does 80 damage with 1 shot. My only issue is that it costs 3 mana. For 3 mana, it should do either 100 or 120 damage, or the spell should cost 2 mana, especially since one of the big problems with it is that it does indeed consume. So, I would say for 3 mana, either make it so it doesn't consume, or make it so it does 120 damage. Because otherwise, this spell is just, I don't know. Now, I like the effect. I definitely like something that offers a little bit of self-healing. But for its expensive mana cost and the idea that it consumes, I can't really put it any higher than that. It's a shame, too, because I do like the idea of that spell, but there's a few too many failings in it. Double tap. Fire 2 shots in quick succession. If this kills an enemy, cast this again. So it does cost 4 mana, and I think that, to me, that's what really holds it back. But it is 2 shots for 120 damage, so assuming both shots land, that's 240 damage, and if it kills an enemy, then you cast it a second time. So it's a good way to clear out one enemy and then quickly move and hit another one for a bunch of damage. Or if you're really good, you just get a chain reaction going with double tap. It's like, rule number 2, motherfucker! So, my thought on this is the high mana cost really prohibits me from putting it any higher than that, but I do like the idea of this spell. I just wish it didn't cost so much. 4 basically makes it so that either you have to be playing as the shopkeeper, or you need to be... Hold on. Or you need to be really lucky with your first couple of relic pulls in order to even be able to cast it. And typically for 4 mana, I'm looking for things like Hailstorm. Something that's a little bit more all-encompassing, so... Again, I think it's a good spell, but... Again, maybe if it's going to cost 4 mana, maybe it should do either a little bit more damage per shot, or you should lower it to 3 mana. Just my way of thinking. Glassify. Fire a shot that applies 3 fragile. Now, it's unfortunate that I don't see this spell as often as I would like. And when I do, typically I'm not thinking, oh, I should really take that because that'll help me really apply some damage. So this is one where I just have to call myself out. This is not a bad spell. It only does 10 damage, but applying 3 fragile means that, hey, maybe now that double tap, instead of doing 120, is now doing 180 per shot. This only costs 1 mana, and it's a relatively common spell. The effect is simple, and especially if you have something like the magnifying lens to make it so that instead of doing 150% damage, you're doing 200% damage. Basically, the enemy takes double damage when they have fragile, and they now have 3 stacks of it. Boy, they better hope you don't have like a Ragnarok or something. No, I think Glassify is a wonderful setup spell. My only problem is that I don't trust myself with it. And that might be a personal thing, but I know myself well enough to know that if I hit an enemy with Fragile, the next thing I hit them with is probably going to be something like, oh, you hit them with minigun, good job. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have the potential. I'm putting it at A rank with the proviso that if you're good enough to hold off and get the right attack, you know, unlike my impatient ass, then you've got something truly special on your hands with this one. Health Potion. Catch this to heal 40 HP, consume. It only costs 1 mana, and it's just a quick 40 HP heal. The fact of the matter is, I find this to be almost indispensably useful on the playing on the higher health passes. I really think Health Potion is great. It's gonna come up once, you're gonna throw it, you're gonna catch it, and because it consumes, it's not gonna keep clogging up your deck. And furthermore, if you have any relics that work well with things that activate upon a card being consumed, just off the top of my head, Meat Shield. Well, now you've got some shield on top of some health back. It's really hard to say anything negative about Health Potion aside from you have to catch it afterwards. So you throw it, then you have to catch it. Don't use it when your enemy is in the middle of an attack, and you should be fine. Health Potion, I think, is great to have. Hellfire. Hit all tiles randomly, can hit self. This costs 2 mana, and each shot does 80 damage. It's going to hit every tile on the board once when you cast it. So that may make it so it seems really intimidating to dodge. Really, all you have to do is look where it's hitting, and once the shot hits there, you can stand in that spot, and everything else will just kind of go around you. Now, the thing is, this spell is really random. And like all things that are random, I have to say, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I don't think it's horrible by any means. It is pretty all-encompassing. It can do huge amounts of damage to the Gate of Eden. Everything else, I don't know. It's, again, a little too random, and couple that with the idea that you can hit yourself with it, it just seems like there's too much at stake. So, no Hellfire for me, thanks, I'm good. I don't think it's a D rank spell. It can still get work done in certain situations. It's just not for me. Too much going on all at once. Leech. When this hits, heal HP equal to this spell's damage and consume. So it fires 1 shot for 40 damage that costs 2 mana. So, once again, much like Health Potion, I say there's no downside to Leech. But what about the idea that it consumes? Well, that means it's not clogging up your deck later. You might only be able to use it once per fight, but... Now, once again, let's come back to this Glassify thing. Say you get Glassify right before Leech. Well, now you can get 60 HP back from it, and that's assuming you don't have any spell power additions. Again, I just don't see a negative side to Leech. It's a good way of restoring some health. Obviously, it's not going to do much on Hell Pass 14. All the way up to that, though, it's going to do you some good. And you don't have to kill the enemy to get the health up. All it has to do is hit. That's it. That you have one job. That's it. I don't know. It's simple. I like simple and easy to understand, and because I have to aim it myself, I actually feel far more confident in the idea that I'm not going to just arbitrarily miss with it. If I miss, it's my fault for not watching the way the enemy was moving. So, yeah, I like Leech. I'm sure that's one of the spells on this list that a lot of people are going to disagree with me on, but like I said, I'm completely open to discussion. Hit me up, send me a comment, let me know what you think. If you think that I'm overlooking something or I'm not being nice enough to a spell, let me know. I'm willing to listen. Moving on, we've got Pandemic, much like what's going on outside right now. Poison targets explode, applying 60 poison to themselves and nearby targets. Okay, so it's not that bad. It costs 2 mana. The requisite, of course, is that enemies need to actually be poisoned themselves before anything else will happen. But then they can spread that poison to others, much like an actual pandemic. So, This spell absolutely needs another poison spell to work, so for that reason I should put it down here, but I'm trying to be more lenient on spells that have something else needed as a requirement. So just as a quick... So with that in mind, let me rank it a little bit differently. So this is one of those things that can this work outside of a poison deck? Absolutely it cannot. However, if you have any means by which to apply poison, like let's just take the easy road. Let's say you have Anubis, and then you drop Pandemic. So now you basically hit the enemy with 100 poison, plus they could also hit other enemies with it. It's a good way to keep the poison going. It's a good way to keep stacking it. Again, my biggest issue with it is that 1, the enemy has to already be poisoned, and 2, because they're doing it in a big burst in all the tiles around them, there is the off chance that you could get poisoned yourself, or worse, that you could poison a hostage. So, I don't know, I think it belongs in like C or B. Just the requirements are a little harsh, and it really takes, and you have to be real careful with how you use it. So, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think I'm just looking at it from the most unbiased point of view. It's dangerous. I don't know. Maybe I will put it up at B. But again, that's if you have poison in your deck already. If you don't have any means by which to poison the enemy, then yes, this card is absolutely useless and it goes down here. So 2 different ratings. I'm going to leave it up here with, again, with the proviso that if you don't have any poison in your deck, don't take it. It's just not going to do anything. Pinch. Hit yourself for 1 damage. So this sounds stupid. Why would you engage in the self-flagellation that this card represents? Well, there are some relics that actually do trigger when you hit yourself, or just when you take damage. Things like Thorn Mail or Kinetic Shield. Those things activate it, but by itself, yeah, this is pretty awful. I'm not gonna lie, if I'm rating it completely in a bubble, this spell definitely belongs down in the D range. Now, let me tell you why every now and again you should consider using it. This is one of those spells that can actually get a number of interesting add-ons via upgrades. And it can do some interesting things, like say you have a build that really requires you to have Fragile. You can have it apply Fragile to you on hit. Or if you upgrade it a couple of times to give you, like say, you apply 10 shield and then bonus 20 shield. Or let's say you upgrade it further than that and you have it double cast. Well, now, and this is an extreme scenario, I know, but you now have a spell that's giving you 60 shield for the cost of maybe 2 health or just a little bit of that shield, and it's the same amount as the shields up spell. I don't know. This one is a tricky one because you're obviously taking it to try to activate the self-damage relics. And that's fine, but by itself it's really hard to recommend this spell. Like, even when you're playing as Riva, you can put up the reflector and then use this. Problem is, you're only reflecting like 1 damage. So, I don't know, I'm very torn on Pinch, because I can see the potential in it. I do think it's got a lot going for it. But rating it strictly in a vacuum, I have to put it there. I really do. But again, keep in mind that this spell is designed to have upgrades placed on it so that it does other things. So, I honestly say you should give this spell a try if you've got any relics that work off of being hit, because it's a good way to get a little bit of a quick cheap shot off if you've got Thorn Mail or things like that. Or it's a good way to activate phase plates as well. But without those, I have to put it there. It's my own rules, and it kind of stinks because I do think there's a lot of applications for Pinch. But, yeah. I've already gone over that. I'm at this point sounding like a broken record, so we're just going to clip that on the head and move on to Poison Dart. Fire a shot that applies 60 poison. So it fires one shot for 20 damage for 1 mana that applies 60 poison. It's as simple as it gets. It's Miseri's version of Frostbolt. Now, the thing is, the 60 poison, real potent. It's potent faster than Frostbolt's Frost is, and because of that, I want to give it the nod. Thing is, this is also very much one of those, you know, average spells. This is one of those design dock spells. I don't know, does it belong in A rank or B rank? I don't think it's a bad spell. I find myself taking it frequently enough because you can just easily slot a 1-mana spell into most deck archetypes just to get a little extra. I don't know. I think because of that, I want to put it at A, but I recognize that it's essentially a design dock spell, so it belongs in B. I don't know. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to leave it there for now. Poison Tails. Hit the back row applying 80 poison and pushing targets forward. So, this one's odd, because I understand that 80 poison is no small amount, and against the Gate of Eden, that's huge. Against everything else, it needs to be standing in the very back in order for it to make a difference. And most enemies aren't going to stay in the very back all that much. I mean, you can hit Gunner with it. That's a plus. Otherwise, I find myself having a very hard time hitting enemies with this because most of them aren't just gonna sit there in the very back and just waiting to get hit by Poison Tails. They're not calling for you to be like, "Hey, I'm back here now, you can use that spell." More often than not, you gotta use what's available to you, and with so many enemies in the game that like to dart at you or come over to your side of the field to try to slap you with a spear or a scythe or a bladed tail or a sword made of ice, very not nice. I don't know, I have very little use for Poison Tail. It just doesn't have enough of an effect for me to recommend taking it all the time. You pretty much take it when you're going to fight the gate. That's about the best use it's going to get. And even then, I say if you can only take Poison Tail or Firewall, take Firewall. Firewall is going to be more useful against more things faster. Rest. Freeze for 1 second to heal 40 HP. You anchor for that time, and it consumes. It costs 2 mana. It's another self-healing option. I don't deny that. I don't like that it puts you in a state of freeze, and that state of freeze can actually lead to more trouble than it's worth. But again, it is a self-healing option. If you don't find Leech or Health Potion, there's nothing against taking Rest. It's a heal. It does consume. The reason I don't want to put it at the S rank, 1, it costs 2 mana. Now, you can get the same 40 health off of Health Potion, and it also consumes. So I think what they should do with Rest, either A, they should make it cost 1 mana to put it more in line with Health Potion, or, did I say 1 or A? Well, for sake of argument, I'm just going to say, and for 2B, they should make it so that it doesn't consume. Either it should cost 1 mana, or it should not consume. And I would think that it not consuming would be more interesting, because it's like, yeah, okay, it's freezing me in place for a second to heal, but it's going to come back later. That gives it actually a completely different niche, a different, like, use case scenario from Health Potion, and that makes it more interesting. As is, it's just Health Potion except worse. That's my way of looking at it. Again, if you guys think I'm wrong, I'm open to discussion. I say that every time. I want to make it well known here, though, because I do feel like some of these spells are a little contentious in the ratings that I'm giving them. So I would like to hear from you guys on this one, see if you agree with what I'm saying. Next up is Revenge. Hit the last target that hit you. For 1 mana, it fires 1 shot that does 100 damage. Now, when I first conceived of the idea of doing a tier list for the spells, my first thought was, oh, Revenge is an automatic S rank. It's 1 mana for 100 damage. How can that go wrong? Well, after having played the game for as many hours as I have, first of all, that's not really that big of a deal. Thunder can do 100 damage for 1 mana, and it doesn't require you to get hit by something first. Then I have a personal problem with spells that you don't have to aim. Now, I know this is going to sound odd, but I've had plenty of times where something has hit me, I'm like, great, time to cast Revenge, and then I cast it, and then they move, and then it misses completely. So, to me, it just seems silly that you have to not only let the enemy hit you, but then wait for a specific moment in time to be able to hit them back when they're not moving. Like, this seems like one of those things that should just hit. Like, it's obviously not going to hit everything, it's only going to hit the last target that hit you, but why should I have to worry about it firing a shot that does that when things like Anubis just hit? It just does it. Oh, what's that? You have poison on you? Detox. Just hits. Oh, you're poisoned? Pandemic. Just hits. Revenge? Nah, you gotta be a little fiddly with this one. I'm sorry, I'm not the biggest fan, but I understand that it is not a bad spell by any means. I have my problems with it, and that's as far as I'm gonna go with that. Showdown! Everybody get fragile! This one... Really? It costs 0? No, hold on a minute. I wasn't aware that it costs 0. Now, I'm not a big fan of giving myself fragile, but there's a reason to do it. Like, if you have Entrench, you can give yourself fragile so you don't get rooted. Or if you have Limit Break, you can give yourself fragile so it hits in that cross pattern. And for it costing 0? And you get to inflict all of your enemies with it? Actually, this is kind of worthwhile. That's not even talking about some of the things that you can do with upgrades on that spell. So that's one of the things that this tier list project is doing, is it's helping me understand further uses for spells I don't normally take. And this is why I want to encourage a discussion, because maybe you guys understand a use for a spell that I don't. And I would really love to hear it. But yeah, Showdown. Actually, I rated that spell higher than I thought I would. Like, it gives me fragile. I don't like it. Pouty face. Meh. But it also gives it to all of your enemies, and it costs 0, and there are certain things that if you have fragile, they're better. Yeah, actually, I kind of like that better than I thought it would. Or than I thought I would. I guess I'm not a person anymore, I'm an object. Who knew? Sludge Bomb. Fire 8 missiles 4 tiles away that apply 20 poison. So, like it says, it fires 8 shots that do 20 damage each and apply 20 poison. It kind of hits in the same way that, like, Thunder hits. It only hits that specific tile. So it helps to combo this with something that does Root or Time Slow, because it can be real easy for one of these shots for the enemy to just stray out of its range, and then you're left having spent 3 mana on doo-doo. That having been said, it does 80 damage and applies 80 poison, so in the long run, assuming everything hits, you're talking 80 damage up front plus 80, 40, plus another 150, so that's a total of 250 damage if everything goes right. Not to mention, like, what may or may not be true with other things. I don't know. I've seen reasons to take Sludge Bomb and reasons not to take Sludge Bomb. I'm going to put it at B rank because just in a vacuum, I think that's where it belongs. The 3 mana cost really kind of drives it down. But if you have a good synergy, if you have the means by which to ensure that the shots will more or less hit, and you've got, or even more than that, you've just got good poison synergies, yeah, it's good. It's a good spell with a couple of unfortunate downsides. Smog. Fire 3 waves of 6 shots on random enemy tiles that apply 60 poison. So it fires 3 waves of 6 shots, and it costs 3 mana. So I'm not the biggest fan of it being random. That means that you're having a hard. That means that you're not controlling it. It can hit things you're not meaning for it to hit, but it also does make things dangerous for your enemy. And if you really need a poison synergy, this isn't a terrible way to do it. I kind of think that maybe 3 mana is a bit much for something you can't control. But then again, I like Hailstorm. You can't control that either. I don't know. I'm a little torn on this one, but again, I'm aware that upgrades can make Smog a lot better. I don't know. I think high B, low A is kind of where that belongs. I'm just going to leave it there for now. Like I said, some of these spells I think either need to cost less or need to have something else added to them to make them more worthwhile. Well, maybe Smog is perfectly balanced. But even if it is, from a balance perspective, I think maybe, especially considering that it's an epic grade spell, maybe make it cost 2. Just saying. Soul Link. Shot applies Link for 6 seconds. This only costs 1 mana, and even though you're only putting Link on one enemy instead of all of them like Cynet, this is much more usable. Like, you can drop that on an enemy and then focus on a completely different enemy and still damage the enemy that you hit the link with. I really like it. Now, I have to rethink where I'm putting it because this is one of those spells that unless the boss comes with a bunch of lackeys, or basically if you're Riva, then that's one of the few bosses where Link actually has an applicable purpose. Aside from maybe the Shopkeeper. With the Shopkeeper, it's one of the ways to really easily cheese the fight. And in some cases, you have to because she can get absurd from time to time. But basically, if you're putting Link on a boss, you're not necessarily banking on, but you're kind of giving yourself a little bit of insurance that if the boss hits you, hey, at least they're hitting themselves too. So, I think A is where it belongs. I think just because it has limited use against bosses, that's kind of what drives the rating down for me. Otherwise, not bad. Transfuse. Hit self for 5 damage, restore 2 mana. It costs 0 to use, so if your build, for whatever reason, has really limited mana regeneration, then this is good to use. If a lot of the relics you've been finding have effects that activate on self-flagellation, it can be worthwhile. Otherwise, probably worth a skip. You don't need to be hurting yourself. The enemies are going to be doing a good job of that for you. Tuxin. Shot applies 100 poison. If you have Fragile, double the target's poison instead. Now, I like the main effect. It's just a quick, easy shot that applies 100 poison, which over time is going to do a whole bunch of damage. If you have Fragile, you're doubling the target's poison instead. That means that the target needs to be at 100 poison or more in order for it has to be at 100 poison to have the same effect, more than that to have a better effect than normal. I don't know, this one's kind of a double-edged sword, and I'm going to put it where it belongs. It's iffy, to say the least. So, I don't know, I'm very torn on Tuxin, because when I see it, it's like, oh, I can double their poison! And then when I get the opportunity to do it, and I do it, they're at 40 poison. So what have I done? I gypped myself out of 60 poison by waiting until I had fragility to use it. Yay. So, I don't know, that maybe it shouldn't have that effect, or maybe what it should say is it applies 100 poison and then doubles the target's poison. So let's say they have that same 40 poison from the earlier example. With my revamp, If you have fragile, they would take the 100 poison, so they're up to 140 poison, and then double it so it goes to 280 poison. To me, that makes much more sense and makes it like an actual reward for using it while you have fragile on. As is, it kind of feels like if you're firing it while you have fragile, then you're kind of getting punked. Lastly, we've got Venoshock. Shot deals damage equal to poison on target. Now, again, according to my own rules, I have to put it down there because without poison, it's meaningless. But if we look at it as your opponent has to have poison as a requirement in order for the spell to function, then let's go ahead and just say, okay, that's a requirement. How well does this function? Honestly, it kind of falls into the same range of Pandemic. Sometimes it's really super effective and you're like, I'm glad I put this synergy together. Other times you get to the Venoshock and it's like, well, that's great, but my target only has 20 poison. Do I really want to spend 2 mana on that? So again, you're looking at double-edged sword. Like, if you don't have, so just like Pandemic, if you don't have poison, it belongs down here. If you do have some poison synergy, consider it maybe, but really, I think if you're gonna try to like a cap off a poison combo towards the end, like, I honestly think if you're gonna cap off a poison combo with either Pandemic or Venoshock or Detox, first of all, keep the deck kind of small. Second of all, end it with Venoshock, but for most other use cases, you're probably going to get more out of Detox just because it's so much easier to hit with. Now, that marks the end of my 7-Up can. Incidentally, it also marks the end of my tier list video. So, I know this was a long one, so thank you very much for tuning in. By all means, if you have any sort of insight or opinion on what you think of some of these spells, by all means let me know, because I'm always open to opinion and interpretation. And I look forward to seeing you guys. What mouse cursor, what are you doing? There we go. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. My name is Dark Sage Walker, and I will be seeing you.